I went because he asked me to. That's the part that still burns. Grant didn't forget about me. He didn't accidentally leave me out. He texted me the address, told me where to park, said it would mean a lot if I was there. He said it was a big night. Promotions. Investors. The kind of thing you show up for, even if you're tired and your week has already been chewed to pieces. I dressed like a wife who belonged there. Not flashy, not invisible. Neutral enough to stand next to him without stealing focus. Confident enough to look like I knew his world. The event was held on the top floor of a glassy downtown building in Austin. White walls, long windows, catered trays that smelled expensive. I recognized faces from holiday parties, work dinners, the occasional barbecue where everyone pretended not to talk about numbers. People smiled when they saw me. A few hugged me. Someone said, "You must be proud." I said, "I am." I meant it. Grant was already up front when I walked in, holding a drink he barely touched, laughing too loud the way he did when he was performing. I waited for him to spot me. He didn't. I stood there longer than I should have, watching him work the room like a man who believed it belonged to him. Then the presentation started. The CEO made a speech. Someone clinked a glass. There was applause. Grant's name was said with emphasis, like a reward. He stepped forward, adjusted his jacket, smiled. I felt that familiar swell in my chest, the one that said, "We built this. Together." He started thanking people, mentors, colleagues, the team. Then he said, "And of course, none of this would have happened without my partner." I smiled automatically. A reflex. My body already moving toward him in my mind. Except he didn't look at me. He turned slightly, gestured to the side, and a woman stepped forward. She was younger than me. Not dramatically. Just enough. Polished hair, tailored dress, the kind of calm confidence you get when you're being chosen publicly. She placed a hand on his arm like it had always belonged there. "This is Kira," Grant said. "She's been my rock this past year. Late nights, early mornings, all of it. I honestly don't know how I would have done this without her." Laughter followed. Warm. Approving. Someone clapped first, then more hands joined in. Kira smiled, modest and practiced, and leaned in to kiss his cheek. That's when someone behind me whispered, confused, "I thought he was married." I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. My ears rang, not dramatically, not like in movies, but like my body was trying to pull inward to protect something vital. My hands went cold. My stomach dropped hard enough that I had to brace my weight evenly on both feet. Grant finally saw me. His eyes flicked to mine and away again, like contact itself was dangerous. A fraction of a second passed. Maybe two. Long enough for him to register the mistake. Not long enough to undo it. Kira followed his gaze. Her smile faltered when she saw me. Not guilt, recognition. She knew exactly who I was. I stepped forward before my mind could argue with me. "Grant," I said clearly. The microphone picked it up. Conversations around us slowed, then stopped. Heads turned, not all at once, but enough. I felt their attention settle on my back like weight. He froze. Actually froze. Mouth slightly open, eyes locked on mine. "Yes?" he said into the mic, like I was a colleague interrupting. I walked until I was standing directly in front of him, close enough that I could see the pulse jumping in his neck. "I'm your wife," I said. Calm. Even. Serena. Someone gasped. Not loud. Real. Grant swallowed. "Serena, this isn't—" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You just introduced your affair partner," I said, "as your partner." The word hung there. Affair. No decoration, no drama. Kira's hand dropped from his arm. Grant laughed, sharp and wrong. "This is not the place." I nodded. "You're right. You chose the place." His face flushed. "We'll talk later." "No," I said. "We won't." He reached for my wrist, instinctive, possessive. I stepped back before he could touch me. "You don't get to manage this," I said. "You already made your choice, publicly." Someone near the back shifted. A phone lifted, then another. Grant leaned toward the mic again, trying to salvage control. "Let's take a short break." I turned to the room. "I'm sorry to interrupt your celebration," I said, steady as stone. "I just didn't realize I was attending my own replacement ceremony." That did it. The reaction wasn't silence. It was worse. Murmurs, sharp inhales, the uncomfortable movement of people reassessing what they were watching. Kira stepped back fully now, her face tight. She didn't look at me again. Grant whispered, "Please." I looked at him one last time. Not the man I married. Not the father of my daughter. Just a stranger who had mistaken my loyalty for weakness. "You don't get access to me anymore," I said. "Not my time. Not my voice. Not my silence." Then I walked out. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. I took the elevator down alone, listening to my heartbeat steady itself, like something inside me had clicked into place. By the time the doors opened to the lobby, the shock was gone. What replaced it was clean, cold, focused. This wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of his consequences. And I was done asking for the truth. From that moment on, I was going to collect it. When I met Grant, he didn't look like a risk. That's the lie people tell after the fact, that there were signs written all over him, that I should have known. But in the beginning, he was careful, grounded. A man who talked about stability like it was a shared goal, not a strategy. He asked questions. He listened. He made plans that included me without hesitation. We married young enough to still believe effort could solve anything. The first years were a blur of momentum. New jobs, a small rented house, dinners eaten standing up because we were always in motion. When his career stalled the first time, I was the one who said, "We'll figure it out." I picked up extra work. I kept my salary steady while he pivoted. When he wanted to take a risk on a startup, I ran the numbers, adjusted the budget, and said yes. Not because I was naive, because I believed in partnership. When I got pregnant, the conversation wasn't dramatic. Childcare was expensive. My job was flexible. His had potential. We decided I'd slow down, just temporarily, until things stabilized. Temporary became years. I managed everything invisible: doctor appointments, schedules, the quiet logistics that keep a household upright. Grant called me the anchor, like it was a compliment. I treated it like a responsibility. The house we eventually bought wasn't romantic. It was smart. I negotiated the price. I handled the inspection. When my grandmother passed and left me a modest inheritance, I didn't splurge. I used it as a buffer. Emergency savings, renovations, breathing room. I told Grant it wasn't our money. It was protection. He agreed. At least he said he did. Our daughter arrived into a marriage that already relied on me being the steady one. Grant loved her, in the way men love children when they trust someone else to handle the details. He traveled more, stayed later, explained it all with opportunity, growth, the future. I believed him because believing him kept everything intact. The warning signs weren't explosive. They were subtle. He stopped asking my opinion on things that affected us. His phone stayed face down. He guarded his schedule like it was classified. When I asked how his day was, his answers became summaries instead of stories. I told myself this was success. That distance was the cost of ambition. The first time I felt something was wrong, I dismissed it immediately. I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed. A name I didn't recognize. I didn't read the message. I didn't need to. The way he snatched the phone, the way his shoulders tightened, that was information. I ignored it, because confronting it would have meant risking the life I was holding together. Kira entered his life as a colleague, a fixer, someone who helped smooth things over with clients. He mentioned her casually, repeatedly, like repetition could dull the impact. Kira said this. Kira handled that. I noticed he never mentioned her outside of work hours. until he did. Late night, he'd say. Client emergency. I learned not to wait up. The real cost of betrayal isn't the affair itself. It's the way it rewrites your memory. Suddenly, every sacrifice feels one-sided. Every compromise feels strategic, on his part. I stayed because our daughter was watching. Because I believed consistency mattered more than suspicion. Because nothing had been confirmed, and I didn't want to be the woman who burned everything down over a feeling. Then my sister asked me, carefully, "Are you sure you're okay?" I laughed it off, told her she was reading into things. She didn't push. She just looked at me longer than usual. The night after the event, the night I walked out of that building, I didn't go home. I drove until my hands stopped shaking and parked outside my sister's place. I didn't cry when she opened the door. I just said, he introduced her. She didn't ask who. She closed the door and said, "I was hoping I was wrong." That was the confirmation. Not dramatic, not loud, just heavy. She told me she'd seen Grant with Kira weeks ago, too close to explain away. That she hadn't said anything because she didn't have proof, and because she knew how much I was carrying already. That's when the stakes became real. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about my daughter growing up thinking loyalty was optional. About the money I'd protected being used to cushion his betrayal. About a marriage built on my stability being rewritten as his success story. I didn't lose my husband that night. I lost the version of my life that depended on believing him. And once that was gone, there was nothing left to protect except myself. And my child. Everything else was already compromised. I didn't wake up angry. That surprised me. I woke up clear. The kind of clarity that doesn't buzz or shake. It settles. Like your body has already processed the grief overnight and decided what comes next without asking for permission. I lay there for a minute, listening to the house breathe, and understood something that changed the way I moved from that moment on. If I let emotion lead, I would lose ground. If I led with structure, I would win time. So I got up and made coffee. Not for comfort, for focus. I opened my laptop and pulled every document I'd ever touched in our marriage into one folder. Mortgage, deeds, account statements. The spreadsheet I'd maintained for years without thinking twice. I renamed the folder with my own last name, not his. It felt symbolic, but it was also practical. Ownership begins with clarity. I didn't call Grant. I didn't text. Silence is powerful when the other person expects chaos. First call went to an attorney my sister recommended. Not a friend of a friend, not someone flashy. A woman whose reviews mentioned words like prepared and unsentimental. I booked the earliest consult and asked exactly one question before hanging up. What do I protect first? Her answer was immediate. Access. I logged into our joint accounts and changed what I could legally change without setting off alarms. I opened a new account in my name and transferred my inheritance back where it belonged. Quietly. Cleanly. I froze nothing that would be questioned later. I just made sure nothing disappeared without my knowledge again. Then I did something Grant never expected. I listed the house. Not publicly. Not yet. I spoke to a realtor I trusted and asked for a valuation, comps, timelines. I didn't say the word divorce. I didn't need to. She heard it anyway. When our daughter woke up, I made her breakfast like it was any other morning. Same cereal, same strawberries, same routine. Stability isn't a lie when you're building a future. It's a strategy. I dropped her at school and didn't linger. I couldn't afford softness yet. Back in the car, my phone finally lit up. Grant. Missed call. Then another. Then a text. We need to talk. I didn't answer. By noon, his messages shifted tone. Confused, then defensive, then conciliatory. The emotional progression was predictable enough to be boring. I forwarded everything to my attorney. I made a list in a notebook. Old-fashioned, deliberate. Documents to copy. Passwords to secure. People to inform. People to avoid. I packed his things first. Not aggressively. No tossing. No destruction. I folded shirts the way I always had, efficiently. I boxed the things that were unmistakably his. It wasn't punishment. It was separation in physical form. When you move objects, you move reality. By late afternoon, Grant showed up at the house. I heard his car before I saw him, the slam of the door, his footsteps, faster than usual. He tried the lock, then knocked. "Serena," he called, voice tight. "Please." I didn't open the door. "I'm not here to fight," he said. I almost laughed. Instead, I spoke through the door. "I've retained counsel." Silence. "You can communicate through her," I added. "Or in writing." He exhaled sharply. "You're overreacting." "There it is," I said. "The last thing you'll ever say to me without consequence." His voice dropped. "This isn't who you are." "No," I said. "This is who I've always been. You just benefited from it." He stood there for a long time. I could feel it. The weight of his confusion pressing against the door like he might lean into it. Finally, he said, "Where am I supposed to go?" I opened the door then. Just enough for him to see my face. That's not my problem anymore. I closed it gently. That night, my attorney emailed me the first draft of next steps. Grant sent one last message. Longer. Apologetic. Panicked. I didn't read it. Because by then the decision had already been made. I wasn't reacting to betrayal. I was executing a separation. And he was only just realizing he no longer had a role in the process. The first thing Grant lost wasn't money. It was certainty. The kind that lets a person wake up believing the world will keep arranging itself around them. That belief cracked almost immediately, and I could feel it through the messages he kept sending. Shorter now, less scripted, missing the confidence he used to wear like a second skin. By the second day, his tone changed again. "Can we please just talk? This is getting out of hand. You're making this harder than it needs to be." I didn't respond, because things were already happening without me saying a word. His credit card declined at a restaurant that evening. Not because I was being vindictive, because the spending limit had been adjusted to reflect reality. He texted me from the parking lot, humiliated and angry, demanding an explanation. My attorney answered him instead. Grant tried to log into the joint account the next morning and discovered read-only access. He could see the numbers. He just couldn't move them. That distinction mattered more than I expected. It wasn't panic yet. It was disbelief. Like a man shaking a door that had always opened before. At work, things shifted fast. Kira didn't sit next to him anymore. I didn't know this because I was watching. I knew because people talk when a story suddenly changes direction. Someone forwarded me a screenshot of a group chat I wasn't supposed to see. Nothing explicit, just enough to confirm that the room had turned cold. Grant's name started appearing in sentences with qualifiers attached. Complicated, messy, risky. The promotion he'd just celebrated stopped being mentioned altogether. Kira tried to reach out to me once. A single message, polite, carefully worded. She said she didn't intend to hurt anyone. She said things had been misrepresented. She asked if we could clear the air woman to woman. I didn't reply. Silence isn't cruelty. It's a boundary. By the end of the week, Grant's calls turned frantic. He showed up again, this time during the day, when he thought I might feel exposed. I didn't. I was working at the dining table, papers neatly stacked, my laptop open like a shield. "You're freezing me out," he said through the door. "No," I said calmly. "I'm disengaging." He laughed bitterly. "You're trying to punish me." "I'm protecting myself," I said. "Those are different things." His voice dropped. "You're blowing up our family." I finally opened the door fully. "You introduced another woman as your partner in front of a room full of people," I said. "You did that without hesitation. This isn't me blowing anything up. This is fallout." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the language anymore. That afternoon, his mother called me. Not to defend him. To ask what was happening. I told her the truth. Not emotionally. Chronologically. There was a long pause on the line. Then she said quietly, "I didn't raise him for this. That was the moment I knew the consequences were spreading. Grant's brother stopped returning his calls. A mutual friend canceled dinner plans without explanation. Invitations dried up. The social insulation he'd always relied on began to thin, strand by strand. At school pickup, another parent pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. I nodded and thanked her. Later, I learned Grant had been seen at a happy hour with Kira weeks earlier. His arm around her waist, his ring still on. People had noticed. They just hadn't known what to do with the information until I walked out of that event. Grant tried to control the narrative. He sent messages framing everything as a misunderstanding. A rough patch. A private issue being made public unnecessarily. The problem was that he'd already made it public. I hadn't added anything. I'd simply refused to clean it up for him. The realtor emailed me comps and timelines. The numbers were solid, better than expected. I forwarded them to my attorney and felt something loosen in my chest. Options create oxygen. That night, Grant called again. Not angry this time. Quiet. I don't know who I am without you managing everything, he admitted. I closed my eyes. Not in pain, in recognition. That's not my responsibility, I said. I'll do anything, he said. I'll end it. I already did. I didn't respond right away. Too late, I said finally. You don't get to choose the timeline after you betray someone. He whispered my name like it might unlock something. It didn't. When I hung up, I realized something important. The consequences weren't dramatic. They weren't explosive. They were cumulative. Every door that closed did so quietly. Every advantage he lost was one he'd assumed was permanent. And the most unsettling part for him wasn't the legal shifts or the financial tightening. It was watching me move forward without checking if he was keeping up. By the end of the week, his desperation sharpened into something else. A need to be seen. A need to confront me somewhere he could regain control. I felt it before it happened. Because when a man loses everything privately, he eventually tries to reclaim power publicly. And I knew he wasn't done embarrassing himself yet. Grant chose the place. That mattered. If he'd asked me to meet privately, I wouldn't have gone. If he'd sent another long message filled with regret and rearranged promises, I would have ignored it like the rest. But when his attorney requested a mediation session at a downtown restaurant, neutral ground, witnesses everywhere, early evening crowd, I understood exactly what he was doing. He wanted control back. Public spaces make certain men brave. They assume restraint will protect them. That embarrassment only flows one way. I agreed to meet him, not because I owed him anything, because I wanted the record to be clean. The restaurant was one of those places that pretends it's casual while charging like it isn't. Low hum of conversation, white tablecloths, a bar full of professionals easing into their evening. I arrived on time. Grant was already there, sitting stiffly, his jacket folded beside him like he'd rehearsed where everything should go. Kira wasn't supposed to be there. I knew the second I saw her. She stood near the bar, pretending to read her phone, dressed carefully enough to look accidental. She looked up when I walked in. Our eyes met. Her expression tightened, not fear, not defiance. Calculation. Grant stood when he saw me. "Thank you for coming," he said, loud enough for the table beside us to hear. I didn't sit. "I was told this was mediation," I said. "Not theater." Kira shifted closer. Grant followed my gaze and stiffened. "She just came to be present?" I asked. "Or be seen?" A few heads turned. Grant lowered his voice. "Please, this isn't the place." "You're right," I said evenly. "But it is the place you chose." Kira stepped forward. "I think we should all calm down." That was the moment the room tilted. I looked at her fully for the first time. Not with anger, with clarity. "You don't get a voice in my marriage," I said. "You lost that privilege the moment you accepted a man who introduced you as his partner while his wife was standing in the room." Someone nearby inhaled sharply. Kira flushed. "You don't know what he told me." I nodded once. "I don't care." Grant tried to intervene. "This is spiraling." "No, I said. This is landing. I finally sat down, not because I was yielding, but because I wanted my next words delivered from stillness. I came here for one reason, I said, folding my hands on the table. To make something clear in front of witnesses, since that seems to be how you operate. Grant's jaw tightened. Our marriage is over, I said. Not because of a mistake, because of a pattern. And from this point forward, any communication will go through attorneys or parenting apps, not dinners, not apologies, not scenes. Kira's phone buzzed. She glanced at it instinctively. A mistake. Her face shifted as she read whatever was on the screen. Grant noticed. What is it? She didn't answer. I stood. You wanted a public moment, I said. Here it is. Grant looked panicked now. Serena, please. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You built your success on my silence, I said. Consider this the end of that arrangement. The table behind us had gone quiet. Not dramatically, attentively. People weren't pretending not to listen anymore. Kira stepped back. I can't do this, she said suddenly. I didn't sign up for whatever this is. Grant turned to her, stunned. Kira, wait. She shook her head. You said she knew. You said this was handled. I smiled then, not with triumph, but with release. That's the thing about lies, I said softly. They don't age well in public. Kira grabbed her bag and walked out without another word. Grant watched her go like something essential had just slipped out of reach. He turned back to me, eyes wide, stripped of performance. You didn't have to do that. I tilted my head. Yes, I said. I did. A waiter hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene. I'm done here, I said, placing my card on the table for my untouched drink. And just so we're clear, if you ever try to corner me like this again, I won't be this polite. Grant swallowed. You're humiliating me. I met his eyes. No, I said. I'm leaving you exactly where you put yourself. I walked out calmly, the door closing behind me with a finality that didn't echo, but settled. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed. Notifications. Messages. Someone had filmed part of it. Someone had already shared it. Grant had wanted a public reset. Instead, he'd given everyone a front-row seat to his collapse. And this time, there was no one left beside him to pretend it meant something else. Grant tried to get ahead of it. That was his first mistake. The morning after the restaurant, his version of events began circulating quietly. Carefully phrased messages to mutual friends, a few selective phone calls, a post that looked neutral until you read it twice. Words like misunderstanding, private matters, respect for family. He framed himself as a man blindsided by an overreaction, someone trying to handle things with dignity while emotions ran high. It might have worked once. It didn't work now, because the clip had already escaped. Someone had filmed the moment at the restaurant. The part where Kira said she didn't sign up for this. The part where Grant reached for control and found nothing there. It wasn't dramatic footage. No shouting. No theatrics. That was the problem. It showed exactly what he looked like when stripped of authority. Unprepared, exposed, small. The video didn't go viral the way teenagers' scandals do. It spread the way adult ones always do, through group chats, private messages, professional circles that pretend they're above gossip until it lands in their lap. By midday, people were asking questions Grant couldn't answer without contradicting himself, so he tried to shift blame. He told colleagues I'd always been cold, that I'd checked out years ago, that the marriage had been functionally over long before Kira. He hinted at control issues, at resentment, at a wife who didn't understand ambition. He forgot one thing. I keep records, not because I'm paranoid, because that's how you manage a life responsibly. Emails, calendars, messages, photos, not screenshots ripped from context, full timelines, patterns. I didn't release anything myself. I didn't have to. Grant's version triggered curiosity. Curiosity invites comparison. Comparison invites proof. Someone forwarded his claims to my sister. She sent back dates, facts, a screenshot of a message he'd sent her months earlier thanking me for holding everything together while work got intense. Another from him praising my support the same week he claimed the marriage was already dead. The contradictions stacked up fast. By the end of the day, the story flipped. Not dramatically, decisively. Grant wasn't a man escaping a broken marriage. He was a man rewriting it retroactively to justify his exit. People don't forgive that easily, especially when they've watched the evidence surface in real time. Then the hashtag appeared. Not his name, not mine. Something simple, something accurate. People began using it ironically at first, then seriously, then pointedly. It attached itself to posts about accountability, workplace ethics, personal branding. Grant's professional world, the one he'd curated so carefully, started echoing with it. He called me that night. Over and over. I didn't answer. His attorney reached out instead, requesting restraint and discretion. Mine replied with one sentence. My client has not commented publicly, which was true. Grant tried again the next morning, this time publicly. A statement, carefully drafted, apologetic without admitting fault, emotional without responsibility. He said he was stepping back from leadership to focus on family matters. Family. The word landed wrong. Within an hour, someone reposted his statement alongside the clip from the restaurant. Another added timestamps, another added context. The comment section did the rest. The backlash wasn't loud. It was professional. The kind that doesn't yell, it distances. Sponsors paused. Invitations were rescinded quietly. Meetings got postponed indefinitely. Grant lost his footing not because people hated him, but because they no longer trusted him. Kira vanished completely. She deleted her accounts, blocked numbers, removed herself from his orbit so thoroughly it was like she'd never been there. Later, I learned she'd requested a transfer, citing personal reasons. Her career stalled the same week his did. Collateral damage doesn't announce itself. It just stops moving. By Friday, Grant was desperate. He sent me a long email, no accusations this time, just panic. He said he was being misrepresented, that the internet was ruthless, that he never expected things to spiral like this, that he was scared. I read it once. Then I forwarded it to my attorney. Because here was the truth he still didn't understand. This wasn't escalation. This was exposure. Nothing new had been added to the story. Nothing exaggerated. Everything happening to him was the natural result of choices he'd already made, choices he'd assumed would stay private because I'd always protected him before. That protection was gone. By the end of the week, Grant's name became shorthand for something else entirely. Not betrayal, people survive that. Hypocrisy. The gap between branding and behavior. That's the kind of reputation damage you don't recover from quickly. And as the noise peaked and began to settle into permanence, one thing became clear to everyone watching. I wasn't fighting him. I was letting the truth finish what he started. And there was nothing left for him to spin. The legal part didn't feel dramatic. It felt surgical. Once the noise died down and the story stopped shifting, the real dismantling began. The quiet kind that happens in offices with frosted glass and neutral voices. My attorney moved efficiently, like this wasn't her first time watching a man realize consequences don't argue back. Grant tried to delay at first, asked for extensions, requested reconsiderations, claimed stress, claimed reputational harm. None of it changed the math. Assets were traced. Accounts were audited. The timeline mattered, and the timeline favored me. My inheritance was confirmed as separate property. The house, purchased with my funds and maintained through joint income I'd managed, was placed firmly on the table for sale. Proceeds were structured in a way that protected my daughter first. Always first. Grant's income, once rising, now looked unstable on paper. Leadership roles evaporate quickly when credibility becomes a liability. His bonuses were frozen. Equity discussions disappeared entirely. The version of his future he'd counted on no longer existed in any document that mattered. Custody was settled faster than he expected. Not because I pushed aggressively, but because consistency speaks louder than intention. School schedules, medical records, daily routines. The court didn't need theatrics, it needed evidence. I had it. Grant didn't fight custody once he realized how exposed he was. He asked for fairness, for flexibility. I agreed to structure, not mercy. His father called me halfway through the process. We'd never been close. Cordial, respectful, distant in that generational way where men don't question their sons until something forces them to. His voice was tired. "I won't defend him," he said. "I can't." He told me Grant had asked for money, a loan, something to stabilize him until things blew over. His father refused. "You and the child come first," he said. That's how it should have been handled from the start. Grant's brother cut contact completely. No explanations, just absence. Sometimes silence is the strongest judgment. The house sold quickly. I didn't attend the closing. I signed digitally from my kitchen table while my daughter did homework beside me. The funds were distributed cleanly. I moved what I needed to move. The rest was allocated according to agreement. Grant's portion didn't last. Without steady income and without the safety net he'd assumed would always be there, his spending habits caught up with him fast. Short-term rentals, credit reliance, late payments. A pattern repeating itself, only this time without anyone managing it quietly behind the scenes. Kira resurfaced briefly, in a legal sense. Her name appeared in one document as part of an internal review at his firm. Nothing public, nothing dramatic, but enough to permanently alter her trajectory. She wasn't charged with anything. She didn't need to be. Association alone was enough. By the time the divorce was finalized, Grant was living out of a friend's spare room. Temporary, he said. Transitional. I didn't ask questions. The final hearing was brief. No grand speeches, no apologies, just signatures and timestamps. The judge wished us luck in neutral tones. Grant avoided my eyes. I didn't need to see them. When it was over, I walked out into daylight and felt lighter. Not relieved exactly, but unburdened. The fallout didn't end that day. It settled. Grant became someone people spoke about in the past tense. Not with cruelty, with caution. His name stopped opening doors. His calls stopped being returned. His ambitions shrank to survival. And I realized something important in the quiet that followed. I hadn't taken anything from him. I had simply stopped carrying what was never mine to begin with. Everything that collapsed did so under its own weight. All I did was step aside. The last time Grant and I met wasn't planned. That's what he told me later, anyway. In reality, there's always intention behind desperation. I was leaving my attorney's office when I saw him across the street, standing near a coffee shop he used to take meetings in back when people still returned his calls. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in the way men do when their certainty evaporates. His jacket didn't fit right anymore. His hair was uncombed, like effort had become optional or pointless. He crossed the street without asking. "Serena," he said, breathless. "Please. Just 5 minutes." I stopped walking. Not because I owed him anything, but because avoidance wasn't necessary anymore. "Say what you need to say," I replied. He nodded too quickly. "I didn't plan any of this. I never wanted to hurt you." I waited. "I know I messed up," he continued. "I know I handled things badly. But people make mistakes. I've paid for it. You've made your point." That line landed exactly how it deserved to. "My point?" I asked calmly. He faltered. "Everything I've lost. My job, my reputation, my family. You didn't have to take it this far." I looked at him then. Really looked. At the man who still believed consequences were something I'd inflicted, not something he'd earned. "I didn't take anything," I said. "I stopped protecting you." His voice cracked. "I loved you." "No," I said. "You relied on me." There's a difference men don't like acknowledging. He swallowed hard. I don't recognize my life anymore. I nodded once. Neither do I. That's how I know I'm free. He stepped closer. I didn't move. I need to know there's a way back, he said. For our daughter. For closure. Closure isn't a meeting, I replied. It's acceptance. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote something. I didn't take it. I'm not your audience anymore, I said. Silence stretched between us, not tense, just final. He tried one last angle. You don't have to forgive me, he said. But you don't have to erase me either. I met his eyes. I didn't erase you, I said. You removed yourself when you chose someone else in public. He shook his head, frustration bleeding through. So that's it? I'm nothing to you? I considered the question carefully. You're my daughter's father, I said. And nothing else. That broke him more than anger ever could have. He exhaled sharply, looking around like he expected someone to intervene. No one did. Is there anything I can do? He asked quietly. Yes, I said. Respect the boundary you already crossed. He stood there a moment longer, then nodded. Not in understanding. In defeat. I turned to leave. Serena, he called after me. I stopped without turning around. You didn't win, he said. You just outlasted me. I smiled. Not for him, but for myself. No, I said. I remembered who I was. Then I walked away. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt complete. Because the opposite of revenge isn't forgiveness. It's indifference. And I had finally arrived there. A year passed without ceremony. No dramatic markers. No anniversary dates circled in red. Life didn't reset. It reorganized itself quietly, the way a house does after you finally remove what never fit. I moved into a smaller place on the edge of the city, closer to my daughter's school. Sunlight filled the kitchen in the mornings. We built routines that didn't depend on anyone else's mood or schedule. Homework at the table, walks after dinner, laughter that didn't feel like an obligation. She stopped asking where her father was around the same time I stopped wondering. Children adapt faster when stability replaces tension. She grew steadier, more confident. She learned that love didn't arrive inconsistently or disappear when things got inconvenient. That mattered more than any explanation I could have given her. I went back to work on my own terms. Not as a comeback, as a continuation. The skills I'd spent years applying invisibly didn't disappear just because no one had been applauding them. I took on projects that challenged me. I trusted my judgment again. Money stopped feeling like something that could vanish overnight. Security became normal. Grant drifted out of relevance the way people do when they stop being part of your daily decisions. I heard things occasionally. Secondhand updates that carried no weight. Temporary work. Another move. Attempts to rebrand. None of it stuck. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing about his struggles. I felt distance. That's how I knew the story was finished. The woman I used to be, the one who held everything together quietly, who absorbed discomfort to keep the peace, would have called that cold. I don't anymore. I call it accurate. Betrayal teaches you something sharp if you let it. It shows you where you've been overextending loyalty, where you've been confusing patience with self-erasure, where you've mistaken endurance for love. I didn't rebuild my life dramatically. I rebuilt it deliberately, and that made all the difference. I stopped waiting for closure from people who benefited from my silence. I stopped explaining myself to anyone who wasn't responsible for my future. I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. Freedom didn't arrive as a feeling. It arrived as a series of decisions that didn't include him. Sometimes late at night, I think back to that first event. The glass walls, the applause, the moment my name went unspoken. It doesn't hurt anymore. It clarifies. That was the last time I stood somewhere I wasn't being respected and tried to make it work. I didn't lose a marriage. I shed a role that required me to disappear. And in doing so, I gave my daughter something better than a united front built on lies. I gave her a mother who chose herself. That's not revenge. That's release. Thank you for tuning into the Velvet Revenge channel. See you next time.